Justice Nothalpati Venkatramana Garu to formally lighten the lamp and offer floral tributes by the judiciary. Now I request Gautam.
High Court of Andhra Pradesh onto the chair and grace the chair.
Chief Justice, High Court of Telangana, onto the stage and grace his honor.
Post-independence, one of the biggest challenges was modernization and shifting gears from primarily an agricultural economy to an industrial one. The 1960s and 70s may be remembered as the most challenging period in modern Indian history. Two wars, a liberation movement, armed rebellion by certain sections of students and youth, nationalization of banks and general insurance companies, devaluation of the rupee and declaration of emergency, etc., marked the turbulent times of a young democracy. The 1990s were particularly difficult for the Indian economy. The Gulf War, foreign remittances, increase of global oil prices, the resultant depletion of forex reserves, a very high inflation rate, all in all, a crisis was at our doorsteps. Desperate times called for desperate decisions. The result was an attempt to end the license Raj, new market-friendly legislations, and the formulation of new industrial policy of 1991, which aimed at liberalizing the economy and attracting foreign investments. The end of the 1980s witnessed the beginning of formation of coalition era at the central level. In this background, I would like to discuss the growth of the Indian judiciary. The judiciary was also confronted with many challenges over the 72 years period. The Supreme Court distinguished itself by ironing out many wrinkles and merging welfare with the rule of law. The courts have played an important role in ensuring that the rights enshrined in the Constitution are not a dead letter. The judiciary has reinforced the idea that justice demands balancing the needs of an individual with the welfare of the community. It is because of the reason that today we thrive as the largest democracy governed by a written constitution. The Indian Supreme Court has immensely contributed towards the establishment of a constitutional culture in the nation. The Supreme Court initially had to explore on jurisprudence afresh without the help of earlier court decisions on the constitutional front. Slowly and progressively, in the first 2 decades of its functioning, the court has built its own jurisprudence to ensure the rule of law is always maintained. Initially, the Supreme Court provided a very little understanding of the Constitution, like in the A.K. Gopalan case. It was after almost 3 decades that the Supreme Court declared the transformative power of the Constitution in Maneka Gandhi's case. In Kesavananda Bharati, the court for the first time expounded on its power to review amendments to the Constitution. It was only through such an exposition that the 39th Amendment Act was struck down in Indira Gandhi vs. Radhinarayana case. The power of judicial review is often sought to be branded as judicial overreach. Such generalization are misguided. The Constitution created 3 equal organs, namely the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. It is in this context that the judiciary has been given a role of reviewing the legality of steps taken by other 2 organs. It is a well-known fact that a popular majority is not a defense for arbitrary actions taken by a government. Every reaction is mandatorily required to comply with the Constitution. If the judiciary does not have the power of judicial review, then the functioning of democracy in this country would be unthinkable. The concept of separation of powers cannot be utilized to restrict the scope of judicial review. This concept only protects bona fide legitimate actions. It is required that the legislative and executive wings recognize their limits under the Constitution to ensure the smooth working of a democracy. Now I am coming to the issues of challenges before the judiciary. This brings to me various challenges before the Indian judiciary. Broadly, these can be categorized into two groups. The first relates to issues before the judiciary due to changing times. I call these new challenges. Although some of them are already being faced by us, these include such issues such as need for domain expertise, absence of well-considered legislation, non-cooperation of executive, dysfunctioning of criminal justice system, new threats to the judiciary, increasing judicial resilience. The second category relates to the perennial issues before the judiciary. These are issues that have been a concern for many years. Much has already been said about them. Despite this, I am highlighting these challenges again because they require immediate resolution. I call these challenges persistent challenges. They are improving judicial infrastructure, filling up judicial vacancies, ever-increasing caseload. I will first discuss the new challenges to be faced by the judiciary before giving some of my thoughts on the persistent challenges. Due to the rapid development of science and technology, new types of problems and cases are coming up every day. Take for example, the internet. Sale of illegal material on the dark web, identity theft, fraudulent online transactions, hacking, spread of defamatory content and hate speech, etc. are all challenges that we must confront. Another example relates to the money laundering or crime funding through virtual currencies. At present, even understanding the mechanisms underlying such an offense might be beyond our judges and the investigators. An additional layer of complexity relates to issue of jurisdiction over the above. Apart from changing dimensions of criminal law, there is also new and complicated civil issues that have arisen due to advances in the science and technology. These are all transforming the legal landscape and require judges and other authorities to have vast technical knowledge. Our understanding and the laws cannot lag too far behind changing technology. We are still discussing issues related to internet while technologies are already talking about the metaverse. An aspect that we need to contend, that is the rise of specialized regulatory tribunals like Competition Commission, Security Tribunal, Electricity Regulatory Commission and TRAI. The complexities issues involved in adjudicating such cases necessitated the co-opting of technical members in the tribunals. However, no such provision to co-opt experts is available to the judiciary, causing difficulties in deciding appeals. These issues become more urgent when it comes to appeals or petitions relating to environmental pollution and climate crisis. There is therefore requirement of domain experts. We not only need highly trained judges and lawyers well versed in fundamental legal principles, but also those with an understanding of developments across various fields. It is necessary to have continued judicial training from technical experts. Legal education needs to keep pace with the time and constantly update their curriculum. Absence of well-considered legislation. I have highlighted this issue earlier, but there is usually no impact assessment or basic scrutiny of constitutionality before passing of legislation. The minimal that is expected out of the legislature while drafting laws is that they abide by certain constitutional principles. While making laws, they must also thinking of providing effective remedies for the issues which may arise out of the law. But these principles seemingly are being ignored. A lack of foresight in the legislating can directly result in clogging of courts. For example, the introduction of Bihar Prohibition Act in 2016 resulted in the High Court being clogged with bail applications. Because of this, a simple bail application takes 1 year to be disposed of. Unrefined laws needs to mushrooming of litigation. A proposed law can only be refined through the involvement of all stakeholders and through meaningful debate. Parliament introduced a remarkable mechanism in 1990s to enhance scrutiny of bills, that of standing committees. However, it appears that the legislature has not been able to make optimum use of the committee system. I hope this will change as such scrutiny improves the quality of legislation. Non-cooperation of executive. Courts do not have the power of purse or the sword. Court orders are only good when they get executed. The executive needs to assist and cooperate for the rule of law prevail in the nation. However, this appears to be a growing tendency to disregard and even disrespect court orders by the executive. One ought to remember that ensuring justice is not the responsibility of judiciary alone. Unless the other two coordinate organs make sincere efforts to fill the judicial vacancies, appointment of public prosecutors, law officers, strengthening infrastructure, and make laws with a clear foresight and stakeholders analysis, judiciary cannot be held responsible alone. Dysfunctioning of criminal justice. There is a need to liberate the institution of public prosecutors. Total independence must be granted to them and to make them answerable only to the courts. Historically, public prosecutors in India have been under the control of the government. Hence, it is not a surprise they do not act independently. They do nothing to prevent frivolous and non-deserving cases from reaching the courts. Public prosecutors automatically oppose bail applications without independently applying their mind. They attempt to suppress evidence during trial which could benefit the accused. A holistic rework needs to be undertaken in order to insulate the public prosecutors. An independent selection committee may be constituted for their appointments. Best practices should be adopted after a comprehensive analysis of other jurisdictions. The responsibility of public prosecutor is immense. They act as the gatekeepers who ensure that rights of citizens are not sacrificed and that citizens are not harassed through malicious prosecutions. Another facet of the criminal justice system that needs to be changed relates to investigators. There is absolutely no system of accountability in place for faulty and anomaly delayed investigations. A person wrongfully incarcerated due to the false implication loses his right to liberty, property, etc. He suffers enormously. There is no real remedy left for him and no compensation whatsoever even after an acquittal. New threats to the judiciary. An area of grave concern for the judiciary, which at the head of the family I have highlighted many times. In the increasing attacks of the judges, recent times physical attacks on judicial officers are on the high rise. At times there are also concerted campaigns in print and social media against judges if parties do not get a favorable order. These attacks appear to be sponsored and synchronized. The new law enforcing agencies, particularly the specialized agencies, need to deal with such malicious attacks effectively. It is unfortunate that unless the court interferes and passes orders, the authorities generally do not proceed with the investigation. The governments are expected and duty-bound to create a secure environment so that judges and the judicial officers can function fearlessly. Another aspect which affects the fair functioning and independence of judiciary is rising number of media trials. The new media tools have enormous amplifying ability but appears to be incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong, good and bad, and the real and fake. Media trials cannot be a guiding factor in deciding cases, including increasing the judicial resilience. The necessity to co-opt technology in the judicial process was brought into sharp focus with the COVID-19 pandemic. Virtual hearings allowed court proceedings to take place at the peak of the pandemic. It proved to be an essential tool towards enhancing access to justice. Of course, there are many issues with virtual hearings that needs to be worked on. The main challenge is to turn it to an effective system. For the same, courts, litigants and advocates must be equipped with adequate infrastructure across the country. Unfortunately, this is not yet in place. There is a wide gap to be bridged. Advocates and litigants who are from rural areas, smaller towns, or who are economically weaker are disadvantaged and excluded. They have suffered immensely. This needs to be remedied. Virtual hearings are just one method to increase the resilience of system. However, this endeavor still needs much introspection, and we need to develop tailor-made platforms to meet the specialized needs of the judiciary. Now I am coming back to the persistent challenges, that is improving judicial infrastructure. I now come to some of the issues which we are facing. The current state of judicial infrastructure is terrible, to say the least. It does not even meet the requirements of already existing judicial officers. To meet the present and future needs, a major influx of funds in a systematic plan is imperative. Setting up of the national and state judicial infrastructure authorities is long overdue, and I have been attempting to impress upon the government to do so soon as possible. The appointment of judges is a continuous process. After being elevated as the Chief Justice of India, I have focused on increasing judicial appointments. Thanks to my brothers, Collegium, who has helped me all the time to do this needful thing. I appreciate the government also its effort in appointing several judges in recent times. However, some recommendations made by the High Courts are yet to be transmitted to the Supreme Court by the Union Law Ministry. It is expected that the government needs to strictly adhere to the timelines laid down in the Malik Mazar case. High Courts must also accelerate the process of making recommendations to fill vacancies. I am constantly pursuing the Chief Justice of various High Courts to take up this issue. My desire is to witness a near zero vacancy. Another issue is the alarming number of vacancies in various tribunals and subordinate judiciary also. It is nowadays fashionable to reiterate phrases such as judges are themselves appointing judges. I consider this to be one of the widely propagated myths. The fact is that the judiciary is merely one of the many players involved in the process. Many authorities are involved, including the Union Law Ministry, state governments, governor, High Court Collegia, Intelligence Bureau, and lastly the topmost executive, who are all designated to examine suitability of a candidate. I am sad to note that the well-informed also propagate the aforesaid notion. After all, this narrative suits certain sections. An important aspect worth highlighting relates to improving the service conditions of judges to attract best talent and fill vacancies. On an average, judges of Constitutional Court hear about 40 cases every day on various issues. Holidays are devoted to complete pending judicial work. Even after 2-3 decades of service in the judiciary, after retirement, judges are not given basic security, housing or health care. If we are deliberating about a strong, vibrant and independent judiciary, these must also be deliberated upon. Increase the caseloads. I have consciously decided to address the issue of pendency towards the end of my address. This is because I believe pendency is the most complicated and misunderstood topic. Pendency relates to cases which have not yet been disposed of, without any reference to the period it has spent in the system. Delay relates to cases which have been in the system for a period longer than what is generally required. Every delay is not an arrear. Some delays might be due to valid reasons, unwarranted delays are arrears. Backlog refers to a situation where the number of cases instituted in a period is more than the number of cases that were disposed of. Tackling judicial delay refers to reduction of arrears and backlogs. Recent studies that 460 lakhs cases pending before the Indian courts. By itself, this number is not a very useful indicator. Further, the population of India, which is nearly 1.4 billion, and the judge to population ratio of 21 judges per million must be kept in mind. An additional fact that need to be considered are the types of cases clogging the system. A 2017 study by the Department of Justice indicates that the government litigation constitutes 46% total litigation. Actions or inactions of authorities leads to a lot of litigation in the country, expected particularly those relating to land acquisition, etc. The government needs to make settlement to ADR mechanisms the norm in such cases. When other state organs fall short of constitutional expectations, people decide to approach the court and judiciary. After all, considering the monetary and psychological impact of litigation, no individual wants to approach the court without a serious grievance. Therefore, attributing this issue only to the judiciary is only viewing one side of the coin. To resolve this challenge, we need to view a larger picture.